So 70% of businesses they bleed out between year 2 and through 9. And I don't think they forget how to do whatever it is they do. I think they probably get better at what they do during that time. I think the reality is they never figure out how to start replacing themselves in the business. They start stacking everything on their back. And the bigger the business gets, the heavier the weight. And at some point they just collapse under that weight and they give up and quit.
Hello and welcome back to the Fund&Grow, Thrive and Prosper podcast. So glad that you've joined us today. I'm your host, Ari Page, and today I'm here with a very special guest, Steve Richards. Now, Steve's been a consultant. He's been coaching for the last 28 years, and he's completed thousands of real estate transactions over that time, mostly residential real estate. He's also owned and operated several different businesses, as well as learned how to escape them. But about 10 years ago, he started team building and ultimately created his company, Team Architects. And guys, I got to say, it's hard to build a business that works for you instead of you working for it. But Steve's here today to talk to us about how to do it the right way. So Steve, I'm so glad that you've joined us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just dive into it. Go ahead and tell us about your journey, how you got started, what inspired you to ultimately create Team Architects.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's funny, Ari, we're both part of one of the masterminds we're both in. There's a lot of hundreds of us in there that have done a lot of things. And I think sometimes we get tired of telling our story. And then other times we forget all the things we've done. So probably give you the elevator pitch of it. And if you want to dive in, let me know. But I think here's what's important is in the 90s, I went to business school. And so I came out with a minor in information technology. And so at the time, it was a lot of .com consulting and working for companies that, quite frankly, weren't a lot different than you and I and probably the people watching this podcast, because they had napkin business plans that they had written down over cocktails and got a venture capital firm to throw some money at them. And, in the mid to late 90s, it was really cool to come out of school and cut my teeth. But what's really funny is my business degree didn't teach me anything about business. It taught me about management, a little bit about leadership, but probably not too much, and it taught me about economics and business law and accounting and all these like bits and chunks. But there was an entrepreneurialism major that gave us little bits and pieces. But the reality is the small business, which is the vast majority of all businesses in the world, you really a lot of times learn that on the street, right? The school of hard knocks. And so even though I had a business degree and I came out and I worked at one of the top consulting companies in the world, we had all these big clients, especially I was based in Indianapolis. That's where I did a lot of my real estate that I'll tell you guys about too. But companies like Eli Lilly that you might have heard of, Conseco Financial and Roche Diagnostics, and these really big firms that we worked with, as well as a lot of startups. And it was really interesting. Probably the biggest one was the Defense Department, Ari. I learned way more the first few years out of school about what not to do than what you should do. And it was really funny that during that time, I kept thinking like, man, this is not how I would do it. Like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And so I don't think, a lot of people have stories where they say they got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. I think during that time, I didn't get bit by it, but I think it revealed my entrepreneurial nature, because when I was exposed to those extremes of huge businesses that were trying to go online, or small startups online that were trying to become, viable businesses, I got to see those two ends of the stick. And what I came out of that with was just wanting to do my own thing. And I had a pretty ferocious desire to do so. And so, after a handful of years of going through the .com stuff, there was a crash, which was interesting because it happened around the same time. A lot of people in here are probably too young to remember this, but the Y2K bug, where everybody thought the computers were going to go from 99 to 00 and the world was going to shut down. Followed right behind that by 9/11, which was another huge, there was a pretty big recession that happened during that time too. And so it's funny because I just kept jumping jobs and growing responsibility, and I was going the corporate ladder. I had no idea what was going on in the world, but there was a lot of big shifts happening. And what was really funny, just to kind of like put a little bow on that first half of my entrepreneurial journey of what knocked me out of corporate America was, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad like most of us, the cash flow quadrant, and I started realizing like I need to not be an employee. And SE is better, self-employed, business owner is even better. And I thought I had this little track I was going to go on and start a business, become self-employed, and then turn it into a business, become a business owner. And what's funny, what I found, I chose real estate investing. And what I found was it was a lot harder to go from the self-employed person to a business owner than it was to go from employed to self-employed. And it took me 10 years to hit 7 figures the first time steadily in a business and in the real estate business. And I had kind of a reset at that point in time. And during that is when I really took stock of the fact that I was hiring my cousin's boyfriend's sister and my buddy from church's wife and, some random person that I met at a networking thing that used to work for someone else I know, and we just kind of hodgepodge people together. We spent so much time worried about the actual business that we didn't realize how important the people were involved in it. And the reality is, like most businesses, and I think if you look at the small business statistics of America, they would say 90% of businesses go out of business in 10 years. Well, only 20% fail the first year. So 70% of businesses they bleed out between year 2 and through 9. And I don't think they forget how to do whatever it is they do. I think they probably get better at what they do during that time. I think the reality is they get burned out and they quit and they stop. And I think I would say 75% of the time, I'm trying to be very conservative. You might agree or disagree that it's even more, but I would say the vast majority of the time is because they never figure out how to start replacing themselves in the business, and they become the foundation of the business. And the more clients they have, the more marketing they do, and the more they hire the wrong way, they start stacking everything on their back. And the bigger the business gets, the heavier the weight. And at some point they just collapse under that weight and they give up and quit. And that's kind of where I was 10 years in. And there were several things that happened. One that we might wrap on a different podcast about, but the spiritual awakening of like, oh, the universe isn't what I thought, and I have a purpose. And I really woke up to the fact that I'm not supposed to be here to be banging on a computer and working my butt off, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week or whatever. That led me to want to find a different way to do things. And the biggest component that I found is a common denominator across all businesses that we've helped over the last 20 whatever years is that the people make the biggest difference in the business. They are the biggest leverage point. And so, I think I did a good job of explaining things there, but you can start to, ask more questions or poke holes in that or dig in. But the reality is no business owner, by the way, they're probably a job owner. I'm sure you'd agree. They really own a job, is ever going to get to where they can scale revenue and or escape the day-to-day if they don't know how to build the right team. And so there was a point in time 6 years ago, you mentioned in the intro, 10 years ago, I figured out how to use personality testing, cognition testing, how to set up roles and responsibilities correctly, how to track KPIs and understand leading activities to lagging results, and the way the business model breaks down into job functions, and you put the right people in the right place. And then you have the right management, leadership, training. And when you do it all in the right order, they're like dominoes that fall. And all those dominoes that fall can create momentum. And 10 years ago, we started figuring that out. And after 4 or 5 years of that, I partnered up with a couple other guys, and we thought, man, this is really important for the masterminds and business coaching and the way that we go out and help business owners in the world. They need to know what we know about this part. And so we created Team Architects to do that.
I really resonate with that idea of setting up your team the wrong way. You think you've set it up the right way. You think you've hired the right people. A few years ago, I had stepped out of my company, and I really believed that I'd hired the right people, that they were in the right positions. I was getting to the point where I was a little checked out. I'd gone through a divorce, and I was hearing all of the right things from the people that I'd hired. But just like what you're talking about businesses failing, when you are just listening to what these people are telling you and you're checked out, and you're wanting things to continue, you're wanting things to do better. The business still knows how to do what it does very well, but the person that built it did not replace it with other people that know how to build. Then things start coasting and then they start declining. Then you are still listening to those people that you put in place because you don't want to think that you made a bad decision. I didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? So you want to be consistent when in reality, it was built the wrong way. And I went through this very process myself. And about a year ago, I stepped back into Fund&Grow and realized how important exactly what you're talking about. Where had I done that before stepping out of the business, built it using better processes, better systems, using like what I want to get into the TA12, where you can really vet out these people, your employees, your top executives the right way the first time, I wouldn't have been in a situation where I had top people, kind of BSing me, telling me things that sounded good, that sounded great, but at the end of the day, couldn't make revenues rise. And who can do it like the owner? And if you've built that business and you are the one that created all of those relationships and you're the one who got it to where it is, unless you're finding someone that can replace those particular key things, which are very difficult to replicate. This is why team architects is so important, I think. Then you're never going to be able to step away from your business. You're always going to be working for it. And so that's something that I went through for myself. But when you went from the many, many, many years in real estate to finding this out, did you have like a major moment, an aha moment where you're like, wow, I really have to figure, this isn't just about regular hiring, like your average associates or consultants. This is about basically building the architect of the top of your team, the growing part of the business. What was that major moment that you had that made you realize, I want to focus on this? This is what I want to help people with. This is what business owners really need.
Yeah. Real quick before I answer that, I want to piggyback on something you just said because it'll parlay together really well. What's crazy is no one will know what's happening because people don't know what they don't know. So when you put your team in place, why they kept telling you that everything was fine, it was because it was to them.
Exactly.
They weren't actually wrong. They were wrong with what you wanted, but in their world, because everybody's reality is based on their perspective. And when you hire someone with a certain perspective that's limited or skewed from what you're looking for and you don't know it, their reality is everything is fine.
Yes.
Right.
And they would argue that to this day, even though they, I've moved on from them, but that's exactly what they would hold to right now.
And what's crazy is we talked about the whole spiritual awakening. The reality is they weren't wrong. They just weren't living in the world that they didn't envision things the way you did. Exactly. And so not to put it all on you or me, but one of the things I learned was
it is on us as the owner.
When we can't clearly articulate, we have to do two big steps: clearly articulate our vision for where we're headed, and then reverse that into a plan where we can hold people accountable. I guess it's 3 steps: clear vision, reverse to a plan, and then accountability to where we can track how we're doing. If we don't do those 3 things, yeah, it is. We always tell our clients at Team Architects, it is your fault. If you hire, there's only 3 reasons, Ari, why anyone you hire doesn't do what you need them to do. They can't, they won't, or they don't know how. If they can't do it, you hired the wrong person. Your fault. If they won't do it, that's a motivation issue. Like they know how and they could do it, but they won't for some reason. We can say that's on you because of leadership, but if you keep them around, that's your fault.
Yes.
If you can't figure out how to inspire them and motivate them, it's your fault. And if they don't know how, that's the easiest one. You just got to train, but it's your fault you didn't train them. So to your point, it always is our fault. But, I started realizing, to get back to your question, I started to realize that a lot of my frustration with the business was that I spent so much time creating systems and hiring and doing all these things, but what happened was the results never matched the expectations. And so I just really went seeking to understand what was wrong there. And at the bottom of that, there's all these pieces that you can say I learned, 100 different things during that period of time. But the number one thing, it wasn't like a big epiphany overnight, but we started to learn about personality testing. And that led us to understanding deeper personality testing. So like DISC is a thing a lot of people have heard of. It's usually free, and many people in business have heard of predictive index. They call it PI. That's one that a lot of people use that isn't free, by the way. It's kind of costly, but it takes 6 minutes to click some questions. It's not a really deep, psychological profile analysis of an employee. So we started learning, like we baby stepped into the psychology side of things, but we also learned about cognition.
And your wife is a psychologist too, when you say we. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So her, not a practicing one now, but she has a master's degree in psychology, an undergraduate in education. We both have a lot of formal training and coaching, consulting, and actually shamanic practices. So like counseling and therapy and healing. But everything is psychology. Your psychology, the management of your people is psychology, the hiring of your people is psychology, your sales is psychology, your leadership is psychology. We are human people trying to sell stuff to other human people, using human people to manage all of it. And humans operate off of their brains and psychology. And so it's just an important thread to the whole thing. So we just learned if we didn't start bringing that into play, we were stacking the deck against ourselves. And so there wasn't like I woke up one day, Ari is like, oh, I figured it all out. I had like an epiphany. It just was layers. The first layer was personality testing. But that wasn't really good enough till we got into deeper analysis. And then we overlaid cognition testing. I'm not going to get too geeked out on this for everyone. If they, we'll figure out how you guys can find me later. But if you ever want to get really geeky, we can talk about the differences of cognition and connotation and all these different segments of your brain. But I'll just say this, in the TA12, which is the team architects, it's 12 traits that we analyze for someone to see how they would fit in a particular job. 4 of those traits of the 12 are cognition traits. They don't relate to personality particularly. What they actually do is help us understand how somebody interacts in their environment. So it's about problem solving, communication, rapid processing, and creativity. Those are the generalized, for the sake of this conversation, 4 things that we test. And so, Ari, if you're trying to hire a sales guy and you get a DISC report on him or some other basic psychology, most of those are going to aggregate several psychological things up into 4 categories, like DISC. That's DISC. Predictive index is ABCD. Myers-Briggs is one, 16 personalities. A lot of people have heard of. It's like I'm an IJKF. It's like 4 letters. Almost all the personality trait systems that people will use have 4. We have 8. And so it's more granular. But here's what we found is, so if I test your personality traits and I want you to do sales, and I think that the most important traits personality-wise are being assertive and extroverted. And you test great in those 2 things, but you're not creative. You don't problem solve logically, and you don't communicate at a high level, and you can't handle rapid processing. When I throw you into the environment, I run you through some training, I throw you in with some clients, and they start throwing objections at you, you're not going to be able to handle it well. So your personality traits don't ever get to be fully utilized because you're not able to operate in a dynamic environment. And so a lot of times what we see, I don't know if this will help the audience who's listening to this, but be really careful when you're a small entrepreneurial-led business and someone comes in with a great resume and they worked at a Fortune 500 company and they have all these accolades. Because, if I can use a football analogy here, we all understand, if you follow football, what a game manager quarterback is. If you've got a great offensive line and you've got a good running back and a couple good receivers and a decent defense, I don't need a great quarterback. I just don't want him to throw interceptions or fumble the ball. He can actually show up, not be that good, and let the rest of the team operate. Similarly, we see that all the time where someone comes out of larger corporations where they are more of a product of their environment. It's not, they didn't create the success they had. The environment was able to turn up their success level, and they almost were overachieving because maybe they're like a neutral where they kind of play to their competition because they're not an A player. Maybe they're a C+ or a B- player, and they can show up and do what they're supposed to. but they're a product of how good their training is, how good the management is, how good the leadership is, how good the product is, how good the pricing is, right? And so we see those people come down to the small businesses where they want to be somewhere where they aren't a number and they're cared about and it's family oriented. But then we run into the fact that they need great training and management. And usually small business owners aren't good at training and managing. In fact, we're averse to it because we think management sucks and we don't ever need training because we're entrepreneurial and we figure things out. And so we're not only not good at it, we're usually bad at it. And so the big epiphany to kind of round that question off, it was a culmination of things that led us to believe these 5 pillars. One is that we need roles and responsibilities to be well-defined, because if I have a fuzzy target when I'm trying to hire, if I think I'm hiring a closer, Ari, for sales, but I bring him in and put him on the dialer and have him start lead genning, that's not closing. It may feel like sales, but that guy came in to close negotiations and now he's trying to generate leads on a dialer. That doesn't feel good. Just like if we bring someone in to do, project management, and then we stick them in customer service and they're having people yell at them all day. Well, I wouldn't call it a bait and switch, but that kind of thing happens all the time. So that's number one, is having roles and responsibilities defined really well. Number two is good candidate selection. That's what our TA12 really helps with, to where we can look at someone's brain and how the psychology and how they work and see if they're going to be a good fit when the role is defined well. Because we don't know how to pick the right person if we don't know what we're asking them to do. And then the other 3 are just onboarding and training them well, managing them well, and leading them well. And if you guys are taking notes on this and trying to take something away, just know that you don't have to be perfect at all 5 of those, but you have to start really working on all 5 of those aspects to have a good team. Because I don't care, Ari, if you bring the best employee ever in, if you don't train and manage them well or onboard them correctly, they're never going to get off to the right foot, or they're never going to do well, or they're never going to express themselves. Likewise, if you have great training and management, great products and services, but you hire the wrong person, it's really hard to get them to ever fit in.
Yeah. So could you take a moment to walk us through the steps that a business owner would take when they decide to implement the TA12, from first contact with a potential employee to seeing the results, and then how they would implement that in the hiring process?
Yeah, for sure. I'll simplify because it'd be a little hard on visually here but I will say this too. Probably, Ari, what's just as important as using it for candidate selection, actually, I would argue it's more important, is using TA12 to assess all your current people, because you already hired them. So now you're not stuck with them. I don't want to say that, but they're here. And if you're trying to squeeze the most juice out of an employee, if you know they're not as assertive as they need to be, or they're not as organized as they need to be, or they're more optimistic or too pessimistic or something, when we look at these traits, we can actually start to create specific management and training plans that will allow us to be more effective with each employee. So I would say, if you're trying to figure out how to use the team architect system, and our real gold standard offering, Ari, is the best, cheapest recruiting. We're really good at the recruiting piece of actually just finding the people for you and saying, here's the top couple interviews. But I'll explain that process for candidate selection, so that people can do this on their own too. And by the way, you don't have to use team architects for this. I'm a little biased that I think it's the best thing on the market like this, and I would be hard pressed to see if anybody can find anything like it. But I'll tell you how to do it on your own without us, just so people can get a straight give here. But I will say, don't sleep on the fact, if you're not hiring right now, or if you're a solopreneur, then if you're working on your own and you're actually doing business, closing deals, whatever you're doing, you literally already made your first hire. And it's the worst hire you ever made because you hired yourself to do every single job, and you're the only one working for your company right now. And although you're probably the most productive employee you might hire, for a period of time, until you realize there's people that are a lot more productive than you once your company's built out. But just realize, even if you're a solopreneur, testing yourself to see where your strengths and weaknesses are is really important. And especially if you're paying somebody else to work for you and you don't know where their strengths and weaknesses lie, if that right bud is in the right seat, or even if they are in the right seat, do you know how to train and manage them most effectively? Don't sleep on that. But just very briefly, to answer your question, A lot of people wait all the way until the end and say, hey, I got a candidate I want to hire. I'm going to test them. To us, that's a big, long waste of time getting them there. And so in the recruiting process, what we do in a very detailed, deep fashion with our recruiters, but you guys can do this too, is once the role is defined really well, the next step is to write a really great ad. We need to get traction on that ad. But so we want to put it on Indeed or wherever we put it, but we're going to boost it, pay for ad marketing and things, right? We want to get that ad out. But if we're going to spend money and time to get an ad out and bring a lot of people in that we have to talk to, we want to make sure it fits really well, not only with the job, but that it speaks to the type of person we're looking for. So psychology comes into play again. So with AI now and other tools, there's no excuse for writing a bad job ad. You should be able to write an ad that's almost like a love letter to the exact person you're looking for, so that when they read it, they're like, oh man, that's me. I want this job. How do I apply? And then they apply, because the job ad is only to get applicants. Once we get applicants, we do some quick pre-screening because, there's so many people that maybe other foreign national, people from other countries who are applying to try to get a green card, or all this funky stuff happens when you start running ads, or people just apply who aren't any kind of fit. So when the applicants come in, we quickly screen them for what we call green lights and red flags. And that's just for things that we're looking for, like they've been in our industry for 2 or 3 years, or they've done the job I need them to do for 5 years, or they have the accreditations or licenses I need. Whatever you've decided for whatever job it is, we do a quick screen to say, hey, a red flag we might want to avoid is they've had 3 jobs in 18 months. They've have a total of less than 5 years total since college, or didn't go to college or whatever. Green lights are going to be things we're looking for. And so we do a great ad that's well written. We quickly, speed to lead. We quickly, when someone applies, same day, try to be within minutes actually, but we want to skin the resume. And if we like the resume, we're going to reach out and talk to that person. Quick 5 to 10 minute call. And this is where you can gut check. Ari, I'm sure I know you got team members now. I don't know how much involved you are, in the interviewing process and things, but it's funny when you're trying to get a hold of someone, you can't get a hold of them. They're probably not a good employee.
Yeah.
And if you finally do get a hold of them and they're screaming their kids in the background and dogs are going crazy, and not that I don't love kids and dogs, but like you start to realize like this person lives in a chaotic environment and they don't even have the awareness to get into a quiet place to call a potential employer. So the first 30 to 60 seconds on the phone, you get a pretty big gut check of this person. We ask just a couple very specific questions just to get a feel for them. We tell them it's not an interview. We just want to make sure that we're both on the same page with the job. And that's the point where we try to write candidates with good marketing flow in the job ad. We skim the resume to kick all the applicants out who aren't actually candidates. We took the candidates and who we think have potential, and we call them. If you're really busy, you don't have time, you can send, messages and texts and things. We found in today's environment, it's better to call them. So this is the step where if that call goes well, while we have them live, I would guess you would agree in your business too. When you have someone live on the phone, that is the time to ask for a closing. And the closing is, hey, we have an assessment that's a requirement for everyone to take prior to interviews. I feel good about this phone call. And if you're still interested, this takes about 45 minutes. When can you get that done? So if you guys aren't using our Team Architects assessment, if you're using DISC or something else, that's the point in which we believe you should go ahead and apply the science to say, hey, we took the applicants and got them to candidates. So we screened off more than half or 2/3 of the people, by the way, don't even get past the resume grade. And then from there, we can only get a hold of about half of those people, and half of those people we talk to about half of the half. So we're talking like 10, 20% of applicants here. We're actually asking them to take our assessment. And we do it very early in the process. And only about 30% to 33% actually score high as a good fit for this job. So here's what happens. Now, if they scored high on our assessment, by the way, the reason 67 to 70% already don't score high, a big chunk of those people don't even finish the assessment or take it.
Mm.
They're like 45 minutes, like I'm out of here. I don't have, this is wasting my time, or yeah, I'll do it later, and they're busy. So they don't really want the job. So it's a nice hurdle to get people to jump over to see how serious they are about the job and how, interested they are. If they say I'll take it tonight and they don't, and we liked their resume and the phone call, we'll give them a couple chances. We might call them back and say, hey, we noticed you didn't take it. Did you get busy? What happened? We'll give them one or two chances, but that's where the courting ends on the front end, to where after that, we now know we have a resume we like. We know how to pre-screen call that we liked, and we scored high. Psychologically, their brain works the way that we need them to work. Now we have qualified candidates. So now is when we actually start the more in-depth interviewing process. And we kicked out 90% of the people that apply before we actually start getting on Zooms or having people come to an office for an interview.
I like that you can use it for pre-screening, the TA12 for pre-screening candidates, as well as the idea of using it for your current team to identify where can I do better training? How can I help, my processes and systems? Where are we fighting things? Are these people even a good match? I mean, I hate to see it like that, just say it like that, but are they even a good match for where I have them? But real quick, let's go ahead and drop your contact information for people that have gotten to this point of the interview, just so that they can, if they are interested in anything they hear that they've heard so far, that they can get in contact with you, that they can move forward on this, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, I think the best way, Ari, we talked about it. If you want to I'm going to have my team set up a direct link for you guys, for anyone who comes to your podcast. So we'll just do the Team Architects, THE on the front of it, theteamarchitects.com/Fund&Grow. And we'll just do FUNDANDGROW. So Fund&Grow. What I'm going to do, Ari, is have that. It'll be a form that will literally go straight to me through my team. And then I'll have a place where people can say, hey, do you want more information? Do you want to talk to our team? What do you want to talk to me directly? And that way I can handle things, in the best manner. And because I really want to be a resource, I do a lot of these. And of course we want the business. Of course we'd love to help people with recruiting and sell our Team Architects product. But I will just say this, because this is kind of, the point. I think it's a good time to say it is literally on this earth to humanity evolve. I see it as a very big all here for big purposes, but we don't always get the perspective of what it really means. And for me to help humanity evolve, the way that I do that is after almost 30 years of being involved in small business with businesses, small to medium businesses, is helping business owners find their way. And it's finding their way to their best self. And their best self is never trapped working, even 40, 50, 60 hours a week, with your revenues and incomes not meeting your expectations, and you not being a happy, successful person. Because what I've seen, Ari, is when you can install the right people, we do business coaching and deep retreats, and I help operate a couple of different masterminds, and there's a little whole ecosystem going on. But the reality is, what we know is that hiring the right people is the key to getting your time and money freedom back. Because when you bring the right people in with the right processes, they will grow your income and it will increase your free time. And then what will happen is you'll go to explore yourself and to try to figure out who you are. And I've not met one person who's the type of entrepreneurial person that, starts a company and is able to grow it to the point where they can escape it, where they don't want to change the world, make it a better place. And I know once you have free time and free money, you want to do good things. And that's where we are, is trying to help people to really figure out what their purpose is and how their impact is going to be made in the world. And so I would just say this, Ari, team building, 100% hit the link. If you want to talk to us about any other aspect of being able to free yourself up to be the person you're supposed to be as a business owner, don't be shy to hit the link on that too, because we may have a way to help you as well, even if you're not hiring right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and that link is theteamarchitects.com/Fund&Grow. So I mentioned earlier some of the stumbles, the mistakes that I made in hiring of top people within the company, and it was definitely my fault. So what type of leadership lesson do you think me or any CEO should master to retain great talent, to train great talent, to vet out great talent when you're onboarding them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think the key, we alluded to it a little bit, um, is being able to clearly articulate your vision. You should be spending a decent amount of time understanding not what you do, but who you be, if that makes sense. It's more, if you guys want to go Google be, do, have, that's another rabbit hole to go down. It's a very, decades old way to look at providing value in the world and getting to where you want with growing your business. But a lot of people try to do things, and the reality is we need to be someone. That's where culture and core values and all that other stuff comes into to play. That's more leadership than management. Management is about pushing people to be, productive and profitable and consistent. But the leadership is inspiring and motivating people. And so, from a leadership perspective, to answer your question, I would say one of the number one things you can do is learn how to be very clear in your vision and be able to reverse that into a plan. And then secondarily, as a person, that's more of a corporate, thing for you to learn. But as a person, um, I could go on for hours about this, but I'll just simply say this. It's being open-minded and curious. I believe if leaders were more curious, then they were trying to be more right, and they were more open-minded about what could be rather than trying to see what isn't, I think that they would actually learn a lot more and find out that many of the times where they think things aren't working and they're broke and they need completely changed or overhauled, there's one little tick that they could have made that would make all the difference in the world. And so um, I would say people get myopic where they think they know something, where they believe they know what they know. And the reality is every time I learn something new, 10 new doors open. So the reality is the more I learn, the less I know of everything that's out there. And I think that goes along with humbleness because you can't be open-minded without being, having humility. And those two things together, um, kind of mixed with curiosity, which is more of the activator, the drive to find out what you don't know and learn. And I think that makes that makes leaders great. Um, and then I'll end with something on that topic, Ari. I'll just say that I believe that the best leaders are the best followers. They don't follow people though. They follow a cause. And that goes along with being able to say, hey, here's this cause or this impact I'm trying to make in the world. How can I clearly articulate that, reverse that into a plan? And then how can I be open-minded about how I can execute that plan, in the world? And I think if you can focus on those things as a leader, scaling your company is not going to be a problem.
Yeah. So I like that. And I've also fallen into that trap earlier on and had to work my way out of it. So I can really see those leadership, those ideas kind of coming to play there. But where would you say that, like with all the remote and hybrid workforces, rather than people working in person, where do you see leadership kind of evolving into, given that there's so many people now doing these remote kind of employee, like virtual assistant and all of that? This can still apply to even those types of hires, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite frankly, especially executive positions, we are seeing it more and more. And obviously, COVID was a big factor that really made people realize you don't need big offices and people don't have to commute for an hour both ways to come sit there and do things. They found out you can get a lot done at home and it's actually cheaper. Now, it is nice to get away from your stack of laundry and your dog barking and, if your kids come home from school and things like that. So not every job is great remote, but a lot more jobs are remote now. And I would just say this, leadership is way more about culture than it is about tactics. And so culture lives outside of like the physical location of people. And think Microsoft versus or Android versus Apple, like in a phone. You know, um, Apple is more of a subculture. People call themselves I'm an I'm an iPhone person. I'm a Mac person. They associate with that brand differently, right? Whereas Android users are more technical and they just want a phone that works, or things like that. It's similarly within your company, if you can focus on the soul of it, the core values and again, that vision and the mission and why you're here, it doesn't really matter where your people are.
So let's give people that are watching right now just like one actionable step that they can take like this week to improve their hiring process, improve their existing employees, their virtual assistants, to be able to define them, understand them better. What's one actionable step that we could give them right now on this video?
Uh, Besides download the Team Architects 12, the TA12,
Which I
and
definitely recommend.
yeah. So anyone watching this, the form you land on would allow you to submit to get a link where you can take our assessment for yourself or one of your employees for free, because I think it'd be really cool. That aside, this gun to my head, if you're like, listen, I think I already know the answer to this. It came to me the minute you said it, because in our coaching, we do businesses that are trying to have IPOs, that are trying to be billion-dollar companies, all the way down to people running $5 or $10 million businesses and everything in between. And I'll say the one core thing that I see that would actually roll all the way down if you're just getting started. If you can just sit down and look at your business and say, what are the job functions in the business? And there's 3 to each job function. And so if you don't know what they are, this will be really quick. Lead gen, sales conversion, fulfillment, and then there's like leadership and accounting. We can throw that in as a 4th bucket. Lead gen is you have to have some kind of way to have opportunities come to you. Sales is what do you say to those potential opportunities to get them to do business with you? And then once they say yes, how do you deliver your product or execute your service? That's your fulfillment, right? And of course, on the back end, there's planning, goal setting, accounting, whatever. But there's job functions in each of those. So if you guys don't know any better, and if you're already running a business, you already know what the job roles are in your business. If you would just write down the top 3 to 5 activities that job role is in charge of performing, and the 1 or 2 results that they're accountable for producing based on those activities, just to begin to understand what leading activities are driving lagging results. I know I'm getting super technical here, Ari, but it's as easy as like, generate leads, salesman, customer service, delivery, or whatever it is. There's 4, 5, 6 roles in a company minimum. If you just wrote down again, 3 to 5 activities. So these aren't things that you produce. These are things you do. So I pick up a phone and call someone. I create a contract. I build something to deliver, whatever it is. These are activities performed. When those are done correctly, at the right time, for the right way, the right amount, they usually produce 1 or 2 results. So for each job function, if I start doing that, I can begin to, what this builds out is potential job roles. I can understand compensation. How much can I pay that person to do that? Because how important is that role to my company? If it was gone, how much money do I lose? If it's in there, how much more money can I make? I can figure out how much to pay them. I know who to hire, what skill sets to look for, what background, what candidates I'm trying to figure out, how to manage them, how to train them. It's the KPIs that I manage to. Once I understand the ratio between activities and results, I can reverse engineer those goals into plans. Oh, hey, every 10 leads that come in, I make 5 sales pitches and I get 1 closing. I get 1 client. So I have a 50%, lead quality rate and a 20% closing ratio. Like those ratios help you build models that you can figure out how to expand your business. And that's literally just beginning to understand what roles exist within your company or should eventually, and what the basic activities and results are. There's a million ways I could have answered that question, but I think the difference here is this is the beginning of building a business, back to how you open this podcast, rather than building a job. And many people are working in corporate America or whatever, and they say things like, I can't wait to quit my job and go full-time in my business. That is a terrible, terrible goal. Because once you become full-time in your business, you spend the next however many years or decades trying to get out of it. What you want to do is build a business from the very beginning that isn't completely reliant on you. Now, in the beginning, you may do all the job roles. So even if you haven't started yet and you create all the job roles and then you fill all of them, at least you're conscious of which ones you do and don't like, so you can start to hire those out if that makes sense. It's the beginning. If you called us tomorrow and said, "Hey, I got to have a sales guy," and like I said earlier, we're the best, cheapest recruiter anyone's going to find to do this kind of stuff, but we're not magic. We would still tell you this is where we need to start. What is the job? What does the salesperson do? We can help you do the job description, but that's where we start. That's the beginning of scaling your business. It's the beginning of building a team. It's the beginning of we or someone else are recruiting for you. The TA12 report, which I know you've seen and used, Ari, those little gray areas where it grades people. You can't do any of that if you don't know what the job is, what activities and roles. And so I know I geeked out a little technically there, but I think that would be one of the most powerful things that anyone on this podcast could do to start to get their arms around their business better.
Yeah. And it's a lot, but if you don't do these types of processes, then you're not going to be able to wrap your head around your business. And like you said, you're going to be working in your business instead of working on your business. And it's not going to be growing the way you want it to grow. It's going to be a lot of extra work, and you're going to be drowning just like you were in the corporate world. You might as well build it right from the bottom up. So this has been very powerful. And I'm so thankful that you came on and talked to all of us today about team architects and what you're doing. And I got to say, I know that recruiting is only a small part of what team architects does. There's so much more to the whole TA12 software and the assessment. But on the recruiting side, you really are one of the best services that I've ever seen out there when it comes to helping find the employee, vetting them, figuring out where their placement would best be within a organization, and from the cost side of it specifically. I like that it's just like a flat fee versus trying to take the salary and the percentage and all of that. It makes it a win-win. Not just for figuring out where this person would be a good placement, but also for the company where it becomes something they can use for every position. They're not just going to only use it for their top executives. They could use it for sales guys as your example. So I want to encourage everyone, go to theteamarchitects.com/fund and grow, where you guys now will get access to the free assessment for TA12, which is generally something that you would pay for. You guys can try it out. Highly recommend that you use it. Use it for onboarding your new hires, for your existing team to find weak spots and how you can make your business more powerful. And just in general, get on a call with Steve so that you can figure out what more you could do as a business owner to be better in your leadership, to be guiding your company in a way where you're not going to be working in it all the time and you're working on it. So I got to thank you, Steve, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And again, want to encourage everyone to go to the site and check it out. But thanks, Steve, so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say one thing on the way out here. You've been very humble where you're like, oh, I hired the wrong people or I had to learn this lesson. But, what you've built with Fund and Grow is very impressive. There's a lot of people that try to play in the space you're in. And seeing how well you have grown and what you've done and the amount of people you've helped and the impact, quite frankly, because very similar to how we help people build these teams, which can go across any businesses. I don't know a business that doesn't operate without capital. I mean, maybe it's coming in this, digital world, but it's just a different kind of capital. But the reality is I'm really, blessed to be on and appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience. But I just want to say thanks for everything you do too, because I know with my calling to help business owners make their impact, I know you're doing the same thing. And I always appreciate a fellow impact maker out there with businesses. So keep it up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you on behalf of the whole team. Really appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching us on the Fund and Grow podcast, and you'll catch us on the next video.